Hello YouTube, this is Kiryu 904, and it's time for part 2 of 2025's Foreign Fright Fest. Today we'll be taking a look at another Hammer Studios horror flick, the 1974 vampire action film Captain Kronos, Vampire Hunter, which was written and directed by Brian Horace Clemens. Set in 17th century England, the story follows the exploits of the titular Captain Kronos and his hunchbacked assistant Professor Hieronymus Grost, who are professional vampire hunters answering a call from a village suffering from the deaths of various young women who've been found extremely decrepit. Along the way, the two free a Romani girl, Clara, who was imprisoned in stocks for dancing on the Sabbath, and she ends up accompanying them. When they arrive, they're greeted by a physician named Marcus, who knows Kronos from their service in the English military, and is the man who sent for him. Upon explaining the situation, the hunters conclude the deaths to be the work of a vampire, specifically one that feeds not on blood, but youth, much to Marcus's disbelief. Grost goes on to explain that there are many species of vampires, as well as various methods of dispatching them. Later on, the group set about digging holes and placing boxes containing dead toads inside, the reason being that should a vampire cross the grave of a toad, some of its life would pass into it, bringing it back from the dead. Despite this, a few more women fall victim to the vampire plaguing the village. However, they soon confirm its presence after digging up one of the toads and finding it alive and well. During their investigations, Marcus goes to visit the family of his late friend, Lord Hagen Durward, whom he failed to save, which has led to some resentment from his children, Paul and Sarah Durward. As they talk, the physician takes note of a book on witchcraft and necromancy lying around, and of Sarah's very youthful complexion, having learned earlier from Kronos that the vampire they're hunting would appear youthful. He then leaves before Paul goes upstairs to tend to his and Sarah's ailing and elderly mother. On his way back to Kronos and Grost, Marcus comes across a mysterious figure wearing a dark cloak before it disappears, leaving the slightly spooked physician with some blood on his lip. We then later see Sarah wearing a very similar cloak and expressing concerns about turning out like their decrepit mother to Paul. Meanwhile, the hunters, Clara, and Marcus soon set up an alarm system to alert them to the vampire's movements. Unfortunately, their target manages to evade it and takes another innocent villager while in bat form. Not long after, we get a scene of Kronos and Clara, who've automatically become lovers, lying with each other as Kronos exposits his backstory. He tells the Romani girl about how, after his service, he returned home only to find his mother and sister had tragically been turned into vampires, and how he had to kill them both, leading him to dedicate his life to eradicating the undead. Following this, Marcus is shaving when he notices, with dawning horror, that his face looks much younger and that he's been turned into a vampire. With this, the terrified physician rushes over to warn Kronos, but soon sprouts fangs and tries to attack his friend. Luckily, Kronos is able to knock him out and he and Grost quickly tie him up. Realizing what must be done, the two try various ways to end Marcus's life, including stake to the heart, hanging, and fire, but none of them work. During their attempts, Marcus is accidentally pierced through the chest with the metal cross he was wearing around his neck, and finally dies, revealing to the hunters how they can defeat the original vampire. Later on, more people are killed, but Kronos and Grost manage to catch sight of the Durwood's carriage fleeing the scene. The two then come to suspect that Sarah is the vampire they've been looking for, taking note of her youthful appearance while speaking with her at her father's grave. That evening, the group melts down an iron cross from the graveyard and forges it into a sword to slay the vampire, and hatch a plan that involves using Clara as bait. She goes to the Durwoods, pretending to have run away from home, and begs for shelter as a distraction while Kronos and Grost sneak into the house. The siblings retire, leaving Clara waiting for the vampire on the living room couch, who is revealed to actually be the Durwoods' mother, looking quite youthful and having worn a mask to hide her appearance. The vampiric Lady Durwood hypnotizes Clara, much to the shock of her children who finally witness her true form, and reveals that she resurrected her husband into a vampire as well using necromancy. Before Hagen can feed on Clara, Kronos intervenes and uses his reflective sword to send Lady Durwood's hypnotic gaze back at her when she tries to stop him. It's then that he and Hagen engage in a fierce duel and, after a few close calls, Kronos manages to kill him and his wife immediately after, breaking her control over Clara. The hunters and Romani woman then silently depart, leaving a horrified Paul and Sarah in their wake. The next day, Kronos and Gross pack up and leave for their next adventure, with the captain bidding his lover farewell before the credits roll. And that was Captain Kronos, Vampire Hunter. This is an entertaining horror action flick, although it is a bit slow in some places. I understand that the film needs those certain moments to lay out the mystery of the vampire's identity and for character development. But there is a notable lack of action in the first two acts that might bore some viewers. However, it definitely makes up for it in the finale. I found the title character pretty charming and badass, while Grost was endearing as his faithful and knowledgeable companion. The character that falls short, though, is Kronos' lover, Clara. Their romance just wasn't interesting, and didn't feel organic. And while she was helpful to a degree, she really wasn't anything more than the main hero's love interest. There is a neat little moment in the movie where Lady Durwood mentions that she is a Karnstein. This is a reference to the Karnstein family from the 1872 novella Carmilla, which Hammer also adapted into the films The Vampire Lovers, Lust for a Vampire, and Twins of Evil. All of the acting was great, despite the fact that Kronos' actor, Horst Janssen, was dubbed over by Julian Holloway. As usual for Hammer's horror movies, the effects look fantastic, with a decent amount of gore throughout. The film also had some unique vampire lore, explaining how there are different types of vampires and methods of killing them. The soundtrack was also appropriately campy and epic. There were meant to be future films about Captain Kronos, however, poor box office returns nixed these plans, although there were comics published during the 70s and the 2010s. And that concludes Part 2 of Foreign Fright Fest 2025. Be sure to tune in at the end of the month when we'll look at a late 2000s J-horror film. Be sure to leave a comment, thumbs up if you enjoyed this movie review, and subscribe if you'd like to see more. You can also follow me on Twitter. Goodbye, and have a good day, everyone.